of people joining, which is really good. Thank you everybody that's just joined. Welcome this afternoon. Just saying that we're just giving people 30 more seconds just to join, and then we will make a start. Hopefully everybody can see the slides on the screen. If anybody's having any problems accessing the slides, oh, thank you for the thumbs up. That's great. Thank you. So thank you everybody for joining. I'm Rachel Roby, and thank you for joining this session to support our stakeholders through the apprenticeship reforms. I'm Rachel Roby from Cogent Skills. Hopefully most of you have seen or know who I am and regularly put sessions on to discuss all things apprenticeships. The reason why we wanted to put today's session on quite early into the autumn term was just that there's an awful lot of activity that have been going on through the year from announcements that were made by government earlier on in the calendar year. And we thought, given we're past the summer recess, Parliament is now back, and we know that there is still changes going on, that it was a good time to meet with you all, bring you up to date with what we know, what could be happening within the next kind of 6 to 12 months, and what support that we're here to put in place from you. So for those that might not know me, I am Rachel Roby. I am our Technical Education and Standards Lead here at Cogent. And today I'm supported by Martin McManus, who's our Standards and Policy Manager, Diane Wilford, who's our Apprenticeship Development Lead, and we are welcomed from Andy Proud, who is Senior Product Manager at Skills England. And we really appreciate having Skills England representation on the call. So thank you so much, Andy, for joining. What we're going to be doing during this session, so this is a webinar session, we are here to talk you through a series of slides, and we will also be available to answer questions. If anybody has got any questions, please use the Q&A function, and we will monitor that and we will answer questions where we can, with a bit of a caveat that it is kind of a moving policy. I'm sure Andy will say that all the way through this, that this policy is, and what is happening behind the scenes is changing. So please forgive if we can't answer fully, but what we will do is take a note of all of the questions and the kind of themes that are coming out of the questions today. If we can't answer them, we will try and keep in touch with you, and it may be a case where we come up with a bit of a question and answer document or an FAQs at the end, but we will see what comes out of the questions. So what we're going to cover, I'm going to take you through the first section where we're just going to go through a little bit about where we are in terms of some bigger policy changes, what's coming, what's already come, and then I'm going to hand over to Diane, who's going to talk to you about ongoing changes to assessment within apprenticeships and related policies. I will say this is a England focused session, and there is activities going on within the devolved nations, but this webinar today is specifically focused on English policy. We are recording the session, and we will be putting the session up. We don't use AI tools within our webinars because we do record it and we make that available. So I appreciate if people don't have any AI tools on, and we will remove any digital AI sources if we see it within the attendance. Just a little introduction if people don't know Cogent, fingers crossed you all do. We are the sector skills body for science and technology. We are built of a number of subsidiary organisations that cover process safety management and consultancy, apprenticeship delivery, employment services through our flexible job apprenticeship agency, where we support businesses that maybe can't take apprentices onto their own headcount, or we also support with graduate placements and within placement years within degrees, as well as having our nuclear colleagues through NSAN and our awarding organisations for science and technology with SciAS. Where Diane, Martin and myself sit is within our charity, and we have a number of employer-led collaborations, predominantly within clean growth and hydrogen, nuclear, and then the science industries. We have a long-standing history of supporting the development of apprenticeship standards, and I know that that's where many of us have met before. So this is a continuation of the support that we provide for trailblazer groups and our commitments and ongoing commitments to support apprenticeship development within science and technology. So I will make a start. So where are we? We are in a position now where the government has been in place for just over a year. We have just had a cabinet reshuffle, and there has been an announcement around some changes to the Department for Education and DWP and who will be in charge of skills. Those decisions, I understand, are still working their way through the levers of government and Whitehall at the moment. What we do know that Pat McFadden is going to be the Secretary of State for Department of Work and Pensions, and he is going to take on some of the skills brief. He will be supported by Baroness Jackie Smith, who is now taking on a dual role between the Department of Education and DWP. And we also know that there has been some ministerial changes within the Science, Innovation and Technology Department and some Minister of State transitional positions. At the moment, full information about what different roles will be and who is responsible for what isn't particularly clear. We do know that there's meetings going on, and we do know that all relevant parties are sitting round tables deciding on things. But at the moment, what we know is that there has been ministerial changes, which we then know will come with some transitional changes. Where we are from a practical sense, those that have worked with us over time will have heard and will have met representation and representatives from the Institute of Apprenticeships and Technical Education, better known as IFATE. They closed their doors in May after a transitional period, and responsibilities have now moved to the Department of Education and the new body, which is Skills England. We do now have a full Skills England board, and the leadership team are all now in post, and we do know that they are actively working. They have been involved in the sector plans within the industrial strategy, so the 8 industrial strategy areas. Skills England were asked to research, gather data, gather intelligence, and then produce reports based on what the sector's demands are around skills. And also they have recently published a report on priority and kind of baseline work assessment numbers up to 2030 across those 8 areas. What we know, they are continuing a big piece of work around organising themselves and what their priorities will be. We have relationships with various different government departments that all have skills teams within them, and we do know, and we are seeing, that they are working really closely with the Skills England team and also the Central Department for Education to make sure that skills is front and centre of people's priorities, which is really good to see. Practically through the year, and people that have maybe come to earlier sessions or have seen our newsletters or have seen our social media posts will see that some of the wording is changing, some of the language is starting to change. There was big news before the election on what the apprenticeship levy would be, and with that they are now changing the language of what the apprenticeship levy is going to be known as, and it is now known as the Growth and Skills Levy. For those that followed the pre-election and also through the manifesto, there were commitments that were made to change the apprenticeship levy and to open it up and make it more flexible. So what the government have done in their first year, they are classifying it as phase 1 with activity that was pre-launched in February-March time, where they announced that they would be introducing foundation apprenticeships and that they would be adding in flexibilities to the whole apprenticeship system, which we'll talk about in a bit more in a bit more detail. And then they are now talking about phase 2, which will come in April 2026. So I'm going to spend a couple of minutes just talking through what we have seen come out of phase 1, and then there'll be a brief on what we are expecting to come from phase 2, and then I'll hand over, we'll answer any questions that you've got, and then hand over to Diane, who will talk about the flexibilities and the bigger changes that are coming with apprenticeship design. So when it comes to foundation apprenticeships, what has been launched, so just before the summer it was launched that 7 new level 2 foundation apprenticeships were being released. They were published on the IFATE, which is now Skills England website, and they are now approved for delivery. They are being clarified as an entry route for young people, and they have a minimum or typical duration of 8 months. And the reason why that's important is because the government have had to go through a legislative change within Parliament, as previously the minimum duration of an apprenticeship was 12 months. So they have now reduced the minimum duration to 8 months, and with that change have been able to launch and allocate funding to these 7 foundation apprenticeships. They all have funding bands. They are all attached to the Growth and Skills Levy, so employers can draw down levy funding for it, and there is also incentive campaigns currently actively being marketed around additional employer support. I won't focus any more on what the foundation apprenticeships are. There is a hyperlink to some more information, but if anybody is interested in more information on apprenticeships, foundation apprenticeships, there is a booklet that Cogent has put together, which we're happy to share out with anybody that would like any more information on what the offer is. Next has come in May, the DFE, so the Department for Education, which now is solely responsible for the funding allocations and for the compliance around apprenticeships. Previously, the Education and Skills Funding Agency had that responsibility. But DFE published their annual set of funding rules. Regular people that come to sessions that I run, hopefully were invited and were able to join a session that I ran just before the summer on what the changes to the apprenticeship funding rules meant for you as employers, and obviously some insight for providers that I know are on the call. If you want access to that session, again, please let me know. It is recorded, it's on our YouTube channel, but you can see the big headlines that I picked out for those funding rules. The big one for me and for what we picked out was a change of language and a change of policy around the 20% off the job. So for the past decade, we have always talked about an apprenticeship is, you know, a full-time job with 20% minimum off the job requirements. When we have designed apprenticeship standards, we always have to look at where that off the job training will come from. And that language has now changed to an off the job minimum hours requirement. So what the department have done is they have allocated a minimum amount of teaching hours, minimum amount of delivery hours and off the job hours for each apprenticeship standard that has been approved for delivery and is live for delivery. And that was published as an annex attached to the funding rules, and they are the minimum amount of hours that have to be allocated per apprenticeship. So providers would have had an exercise when that came out to check, and any learners that have gone on to programmes from the 1st of August must be working towards those minimum hours. Now, as you can imagine, when things sometimes come out, people start to raise questions. So later on in the summer, there was a version 2 of the funding rules that were published that accepted that there were, for some apprenticeship standards, the hours weren't quite right, or there needed to be some changes to those hours. So there is a number of apprenticeships that have been classified as having transitional arrangements, and an updated annex was published. But what it means is that every apprenticeship has a minimum amount of hours that are required for that individual to train. unless they have stated that they have recognised prior learning, and that is a discussion that the provider will have. But what it means is that how the delivery is designed, how it is delivered in practice, can be reduced in length. So as long as an apprenticeship is more than 8 months, you can fast track delivery, you can increase your amount of blocks, you could bring off the job learning at the front of the programme and have people learning off the job, which has come in previous years, but there is more emphasis now of trying to make the delivery of apprenticeships much more flexible, much more realistic to employer demands, but also learner needs and demands, and that is why they have introduced these. What we've seen so far, just anecdotally, is there hasn't been massive amount of changes for this academic year. I believe that some of that is down to the timing of when these rules came in. Many employers will have already agreed their delivery models with providers that they will have had historic apprenticeship schemes running with, but it is something to keep monitoring over the next, when you start to talk about your providers. And I know September 2026 for those that take on apprentices in a cohort seems a long time away, because you're probably just inducting your current newbies, but it is something to think about, and it is something to talk about with your providers, because it may be something that they're starting to look at, how they could change delivery, how they could maybe flex delivery models, how they could potentially decrease the amount of time that somebody's on the apprenticeship for, and that is a conversation that shouldn't be taken lightly, but it is a conversation that could now start to take place. So it's important that you know that, you understand that, and if anybody has got any questions around that element, then please get in touch, and I can guide you through what we know and kind of key questions to ask. Moving on, level 7 apprenticeships. This isn't a popular topic of conversation for me or for many of people that I know are on the call. Level 7 apprenticeships, we did have what we did think we were going to be told, but at the end of May, the announcement was level 7 apprenticeships would not be funded through the levy / growth and skills levy from January 2026. Those that are involved in our employer collaborations were obviously disappointed, because we have long advocated for the positive stories that are coming out of people that are undertake level 7 apprenticeships, and the standing that they have across science and technology companies. Existing apprentices will continue to receive funding, so anybody that is currently on an apprenticeship or is starting or has just started, their funding will continue until they finish their programme. So please don't worry about that. One thing that I will say is I know that we're having conversations with providers that are looking to see whether they can enrol any additional cohorts before the funding ceases. So whether or not there is going to be a flurry of activity in kind of October, November, December, as I imagine people will try and use the funding up till the last minute that they can. So if you do have people that are possibly interested in starting a level 7 apprenticeship, please don't waste any time in engaging with providers. If you need any help with that, again, please reach out to myself, Martin or Diane, and we can support you with that. And we are looking at then what the future holds for level 7 apprenticeships, and are continuing to have discussions with officials on alternative funding models, different types of provision, and what might happen to potentially replace those programmes in the future. Okay, I'm going to pause for breath. I'm going to see if there is any questions. Hand over to Martin, see if there's any questions in the chat that have come from that section.
There aren't as yet, as I can see. There's nothing in the chat, nothing in the Q&A channel. I think we have informed people of a lot of these things already, haven't we, Rachel? It might not be the first time that people have heard of it. But if there are any questions, people should put them in chat or in the Q&A dedicated channel that we've got on here.
Thank you. No, that's fine. That will hopefully show that I have I have told everybody clearly what my updates were. Yeah, if anybody has got any questions, please put them in. I'll keep monitoring the Q&A section now. We'll respond where I can, or can catch up offline. But yes, as I've said throughout my section, if anybody has got any follow-up support needs, want information on foundation apprenticeships, want help understanding the new off-the-job requirements, or want to keep the conversation going around level 7 apprenticeships, that's what we're here for. So please get in touch, and I will now pause and hand over to Diane.
Well, I might actually throw in a question, Rachel, that any of us could have up with, and this is just from previous conversations that I've had with people, which is about like when we can expect further developments. I mean, I think I personally would probably put quite a bit of store by the post-16 education and skills policy that's to be coming out at some point this quarter-ish. Autumn, I think, was the phrase that was used. I think that'll have, you would expect that there would be some of the answers to people's general questions in there about timing, maybe almost certainly some announcements in it. Is there anything else that we would want to say about that kind of thing? Like, when will we know more about things?
Yeah, so obviously with the apprenticeship reforms that Diane and Andy will hand over to in a second is a massive kind of operational activity. But yeah, strategically, we do know that there is a white paper to be launched again autumn, which I'm thinking could be any time between now and Christmas. But that will be the post-16 education and skills strategy white paper. Along with the outcomes of the wider Department for Education curriculum and assessment review that Becky Francis has been chairing, as well as then Skills England policies coming out. So what will come from the apprenticeship reforms and any other associated policies. I do expect this kind of run up between now and Christmas to be quite important. I think the only thing that I'll caveat with that is, now that there is a shift in ownership or delivery between DWP and DFE, whether that will not necessarily see a halt on things, but whether there'll be a second pair of eyes that will start to look at things or question things differently, as we know is often the case when there is new ministerial responsibilities. I still think they'll want to get these strategies out because they have been long talked about, but whether the timescales will alter whilst they are sorting out who is going to lead responsibility. And I also think the budget probably plays a part in that. The budget it's quite late historically. It's now planned for November, but we can all see the headlines around fiscal environment. We're waiting to see what comes from phase 2 of the growth and skills levy, which we have so far been told will be very targeted short courses, but potentially for engineering and AI. So that isn't necessarily the big spread of short courses that people want, need, expect. But I do think that the budgets and the fiscal environment and where those priorities that have been identified from the industrial strategies and the sector plans, I think this probably next 12 months we'll start to see what the impact of those will be, and then the workload in turning apprenticeships into new apprenticeships, or occupational standards into short courses, or whatever the priorities are going to be. So I do see this next 6 to 12 months as really important for skills, as it's always important to us.
Yeah.
Thank you. Right, I will hand over to Diane.
Thanks, Rachel. Good afternoon, everyone. As Rachel said, I'm going to try and cover the very much evolving subject of apprenticeship assessment. We don't claim we've got all the answers. What we're going to try and tell you today is what we know, and we're going to try and avoid some of the speculation that some of you might have seen. So we've got Andy on the call from Skills England, so hopefully if you do have any questions, Andy will be able to help answer those as well. So the first announcement on changes to apprenticeship assessment came back in February when the Department for Education issued its Principles of Assessment. And this really started to give us the direction of travel. So we're no longer talking about endpoint assessments and EPA plans. We're now talking about apprenticeship assessment and apprenticeship assessment plans, because what we know is that there is going to be some on-programme assessment rather than everything being assessed at the end. We also know that these documents are going to be much shorter than the sort of EPA plans that we've become used to. So there's talk about these documents being 2 pages rather than sort of the 30 to 40 page documents that we're all now familiar with. And the overall aim is to streamline apprenticeship assessment. And some of the words that we've got as part of these principles sort of give us a little bit of insight into that. So we're talking very much about proportionality, no unnecessary duplication, employers being responsible for verifying behaviours, and minimum assessment methods, and making the best use of technology. So I say this all came out in February. And then the next update came in June. This is when Ofqual launched a consultation on how it is going to regulate these new style assessments. And this gave us a little bit of insight into another document that's going to sit alongside the assessment plans called the General Requirements for Assessment. So the General Requirements for Assessment will detail the common features which must apply to all apprenticeship assessments. And for me personally, I was really pleased to see that we're still having the concepts of synoptic assessment, so assessing knowledge and skills in a joint way, not individually, and also that the concept of independent assessment is still going to be there in apprenticeships. So Ofqual launched its consultation. That has now closed. And since then, we've really not had too much more of an update. In terms of what the new assessment plans will look like, within this consultation document, the Department for Education did release a sort of like a framework of what the content of one of these new assessment plans will look like. But that's really all this published detail that we've had so far. We haven't had any templates for the assessment plans or any further guidance that has been published. However, the foundation apprenticeships, which Rachel mentioned, their assessment plans do follow this sort of content structure. So that again just gives us a little bit of insight in terms of what the assessment plans for apprenticeships are going to look like in the future. So where are we now? Well, we know that Skills England, as I say, is working on guidance, and they're working very closely with the Department for Education and Ofqual and for the Office of Students to bring out some further guidance. And what we are also picking up is that there's going to be some potential impact on some of the other policies around apprenticeships. So the qualification policy and the degree policy will be impacted potentially by the changes to the assessment policy. And the other bit of the apprenticeship jigsaw, funding bands, there's also got potential knock-on effects in terms of how the funding band recommendations are going to be made, because anyone who's been involved in Trailblazer groups, we know we've previously had to get quotes for on-programme delivery and for the endpoint assessment, but with potential changes to the apprenticeship assessment and on-programme assessment, all of that sort of funding model will need to be reconsidered. And Skills England has indicated that it will look to develop this new funding band recommendation model and will aim to start reviews of funding bands in 2026. So that's kind of what's happening. When is it all going to happen? So 5 pilots are ongoing. These started, we believe, fairly soon after the initial announcements were made. And we had hoped that by the time we were running this webinar, we would be able to show you some of those early plans that have been introduced in the new format. But as yet, they still haven't been published. We might want to quiz Andy on why that is. But latest sort of indications are that by the end of September, early October, those 5 pilot assessment plans will be published. What will happen after that is that Skills England will then look to revise all the assessment plans which are currently published. They will apply prioritisation, and we believe that sort of high volume apprenticeships and those occupations that are linked to industrial strategies will be prioritised for updating. The aim is that by August 2026, all of the assessment plans will be into the new format, and then implementation and actually people going through these new assessments will begin in 26-27 after a lead-in period for assessment organisations and training providers. So that's what we know. But what does it mean for us, sort of in the sort of process of developing apprenticeships and also offering apprenticeships to our staff? I think all we can really say at the moment is it really will depend on the individual apprenticeship. It will depend on factors such as whether it's a degree apprenticeship, whether there's currently a qualification mandated, etc. And until we start really looking at individual apprenticeships, we can't really say what the changes are going to be. The assessment plans that will be published by Skills England are, though, going to be very, very high level. And individual assessment organisations will then need to develop their own assessment documents in consultation with employers that really provide the detail that training providers, that employers and that apprentices themselves really need to be looking at. So less importance in some ways on the documents that Skills England's publishing. The real important documents for me going forward are going to be the ones that the assessment organisations produce to meet those high level requirements. But what we do know is that those assessments will include some assessment of knowledge and skills on programme, and this could be administered by the training provider. There will be some assessment of knowledge and skills still at the end of the apprenticeship. And throughout the apprenticeship, employers will have that responsibility for verifying behaviours. There's this new language, verifying behaviours rather than assessing behaviours. We still don't really understand completely what that means. So it's very much a waiting game now for this further guidance to come from Skills England. Next slide, please, Rachel. So a lot of change, and nobody really likes change, but I genuinely believe there are some positives to these developments. Foremost, for the apprentice, I think it reduces some duplication of assessment and replaces that burden at the end of the apprenticeship. I think we all know apprentices who, maybe haven't performed as well as they should have done in the endpoint assessment, and it's not always been a true reflection of their ability. So I think this shift to have some assessment on programme and some at the end, it will be potentially a better experience and result for a lot of apprentices. I think it also recognises that employers are best placed to verify or confirm behaviours, however we want to phrase it. I've always felt a little bit uncomfortable that some behaviours are just like assessed in an interview at the end of the programme. How can someone can say they can do it, but are they actually doing and displaying that behaviour day in, day out in the workplace? And I think employers, as I say, best placed to confirm that. And assessment detail, it will in future be developed by the assessment organisations who have got people who are experts in assessment. I've sat with many people on this call trying to develop endpoint assessment plans, writing grading descriptors, and sometimes it's been a bit of a challenge for employers because it's not our day job, and it really does now place some of that detail responsibility in the hands of assessment experts. But this last point for me in terms of the positives, I think is one of the most important things. It will allow for quicker changes where assessment issues have been identified. Quite often we've got assessment plans that look great in the development stage, but once they've been implemented, we've found issues, but we can't do anything about it without full revision of the apprenticeship documents. So this change will mean that assessment organisations can respond a bit more quicker to those sort of issues. Obviously, we have some concerns as well, and this slide just outlines just some of the concerns that we've got. So at the moment, it's still a bit unclear about the role of trailblazers in apprenticeship assessment plan development. We've all kind of sort of a little bit nervous about potential lack of consistency between assessment organisations if they're left to develop the detail. And there's also a danger that there's going to be a bit of duplication of effort because assessment organisations will need to call on employers to consult in terms of their development activity, and potentially that could mean that trailblazer groups have been asked the same questions more than once. And we recognise also that there's potential for a lack of consistency in employers verifying behaviours. So in terms of how we're going to try and support the sector through these changes, for science and nuclear specific apprenticeship standards, we will carry on with the ongoing facilitation support for apprenticeships that we've got in revision. So CIPI, stroke process engineer as it's now called, manufacturing manager, and the nuclear level 5 and level 6 apprenticeships. We will continue to work through that revision process. We're coming to a little bit of a halt on some of those because we're waiting for this assessment guidance now, but that work continues. We will then support Skills England to work through the revisions of all the other assessment plans which are on our books. And we will facilitate employer liaison with assessment organisations in due course when they need to develop the content of their assessment approaches. And also, if required, we will look to produce some guidance for employers on verifying behaviours. For other apprenticeships that we have an interest in as a sector, but they're not ones which we have kind of been responsible for developing. We are committed to keeping a watching brief on those apprenticeships and ensuring that the views of the sector are fed through into any revisions and assessment plan changes. And we will, take it on as a responsibility of ours to keep you updated with what's happening with those apprenticeships as these reforms are worked through. Next slide just shows you those apprenticeships which kind of are in our science and nuclear family. So these are the ones which we will be actively working with Skills England to make sure that these are revised in the way that you want. But I say we will keep a watching brief on other apprenticeships out there as well. Okay. So that's what we know. As I say, still quite a lot of detail is missing, which we're hoping we'll get in the near future. But really over to you now if you've got any questions for myself or Andy.
One question has been asked in the chat, which is about Office for Students and degree apprenticeships. Do we think OFS will be responsible for degree apprenticeships rather than Ofqual? I don't know whether that's a question that goes to Di or Andy or to anyone, in fact, or whether we know that yet.
Andy?
Yeah, thanks, Diane. And unfortunately, I think I'm going to disappoint with this first response. In the guidance that we have received and that we have seen, we haven't had any further notification on any changes around there. I do believe this will all become a little more apparent when we see what happens with the degree apprenticeship policy in line with the assessment reforms. So apologies, Martin, but we aren't able to give a definitive answer on that. But if it is logged, we can take that away and look to get something back.
Thanks. That was the only question that's come up in the Q&A channel, and I don't see anything in the general chat either. So that's the only question so far. No, that's not true.
One.
That's not true. They're coming forward. They're coming forward now.
An interesting one from David George there. If providers are able to undertake some of the assessments, I assume they will want to be paid for this. Where will the funding come from? Andy, do you want to have a stab?
Again, and unfortunately, I'm not getting visibility of these questions, so I'm just waiting for the repetition. And this sounds like a broken record from my point of view, but again, David, that is in the policy detail that even internally we aren't seeing that yet. I agree that obviously funding would seem to be shifting differently if that is the approach, but how that works in reality, we just don't have that level of detail available to share. And again, I can only apologise for that.
Okay, and another question was, will the new apprenticeships only be rolled out once the new Ofqual framework is ready and in place, spring 26? Because obviously there are 700 plus that need to be completed.
So I can probably provide a little more information, which is pleasing from my point of view as well. As we mentioned earlier on, there are 5 apprenticeships currently undergoing development of new apprenticeship assessment plans, and this is part of our pilot programme. We are hopeful that these pilots will be completed by the end of September. Once we see what the outcomes of that sort of pilot project are, we have an internal project team who will look to implement lessons learned, everything that's been picked up from the development of the pilots, so that we can then start amending assessment plans for every apprenticeship that is in our current system. Now, this will be prioritised. Again, that will have links to industrial strategy and other criteria that DFE will be defining. But the impression from my perspective is that once we have the pilot work completed, we will start working on revising assessment plans only, and then these apprenticeships will be in effect live with the new apprenticeship plan in place. And if you notice, the terminology is apprenticeship assessment plan, no longer the endpoint assessment. Again, hopefully that does answer that question.
Yeah, thanks.
Anything else, please just ask.
Thanks. And the only other question that I can see at the moment that's being asked is about learners already on programme, so apprentices already on programme. Will it only affect those who start after the point of new assessment being put in place, rather than if the new assessment plan has been in place since they started? Now, the usual principle, of course, is people wash through the system and complete what they started. But can you confirm that's the case for this one, Andy?
Again, Martin, as you've just stated there, that is the normal approach. What we will see for this, bearing in mind that the whole point of the Apprenticeship Reform Programme is to make the assessment process easier. So whether that has the same transition rules that currently apply, we wait to see that detail. So again, I can't confirm either way what it will be, but again, I'm just stipulating that the purpose of the Apprenticeship Reform Programme was intended to remove red tape from the assessment process. So again, just bear that in mind in terms of what may come in future policy announcements.
Okay, thanks.
Sorry, if I could just add to that though, because the new plans are likely to include some on-programme assessment as well as assessment towards the end, it is probably unlikely that if someone is quite a way through their apprenticeship programme that they would be able to transition to the new plan, because we can't go back in time for that on-programme assessment. So as we've already said, the general principle, someone starts and finishes on the version that they started on, we think will have to apply, really.
I can't think of an example since I8 has had control of this where people have had to change midstream. Can you? No, I think it's always been the case. So the past can be a guide to the future, as Andy very cautiously says. We don't know yet, but that has been the principle for quite a long time. So let's not speculate beyond that. Although potentially on the next question, we could speculate a bit, because the question is, with degree apprenticeships and assessment, will the policy announcement signal how degree apprenticeships could be funded in a move aligned to the current student loan model? Now, I haven't seen anything on that, and I'm not sure we can answer it directly, but should we allow ourselves a luxury of some speculation? Any thoughts on that, Di or Rachel? Perhaps not you, Andy, because you probably won't speculate.
Interesting question.
It could do, couldn't it?
Yeah, and if I'd have known who had written that question before I saw it, I know who the writer is. I do think that there is maybe some mood music around funding changes and fiscal environment changes, and with the lifelong learning entitlement coming in, so every individual getting a pot of money that could be used for education through their life, there could see changes. At the moment, being told, obviously, the funding decision that has been made for level 7 has been made, and that doesn't include level 6, and that isn't in scope. But time will tell, if budgets become tighter or if priorities continue to be more focused on, lower level, getting people into work, solving the not in education and training the NEETs crisis as it is, that whether or not priorities will have to change, and that means that funding for degree apprenticeships may have to change. We hope it doesn't, because we know how popular that they have been through fundable models, but you will be the first to know when we know any more, if anything else comes out on that.
Yeah, it would be a very different context really for the decision, wouldn't it, about level 6? I think level 7, you're talking about a different demographic, you're talking about clearly a much larger scale, you're talking about young people's choices on leaving school, really, which level 7, it doesn't really affect that. So you're talking about a different cohort of people. So I think that politically that would be a different decision. But again, that is speculation. Okay, there are more questions coming through. Gateway. If we're moving away from EPA, does Gateway still have the same level of importance?
Yep. So again, that was potentially when I made the point that we've removed the endpoint aspect of the title. Again, until we see what comes from the pilot program, we will not be able to comment whether or not there is a gateway of fears. But certainly in the initial work that we've seen coming through, we haven't seen that gateway. However, as Diane stipulated, there will still be an expectation of some knowledge and skills assessment towards the back end of the apprenticeship. But in terms of terminology, we haven't seen the final detail. But again, we are now talking about apprenticeship assessment plans as opposed to endpoint assessment plans.
Thanks, Andy. So the only other comment, it's not a question, it's a comment saying Treasury are all about so-called fairness. I merely read that out. I couldn't possibly make a comment about His Majesty's Treasury, I don't think. But yeah, fair point. Okay, I think that's it for Q&A for now, Rachel. If you want to, if there's anything else.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, I was just going to give the any final words from Andy. So again, thank you so much, Andy, for joining. We all appreciate having official representation, but understand that you sometimes get the brunt end if you can't answer questions. We laid out at the beginning of the session that this is very much a moving feat. You could have not come, you could have said no comment to everything, and you haven't. So thank you so much. And I think from behind the scenes, we really at Cogent really appreciate the support that you've been able to provide us through the summer, joining today, but also keeping us in the loop with what's happening. Many of you that are on the call, and I've just looked through who's joined us today, have been involved in Trailblazer work, and will get to know Andy a lot more, I'm sure, over the next 12 months. But it's really good to have you on site. It's really good to have you on the call. So thank you so much. And we will keep knocking at your door for more answers, and we will come knocking when we've got questions or queries or wobbles around potential news that comes out. But yeah, thanks again for joining. I think just to close the session, a big thanks to Martin, a big thanks to Diane and all the work that's gone into this. The offer of the support that we want to continue to put into apprenticeship standards, it's a real passion of all of ours. We've all been involved with it for decades and decades at Cogent, and it is something that we want to continue with, but we do obviously need your support as employers, providers, awarding organisations, professional bodies, etc. So I think staying close to each other and staying close on what's happening, being able to support any activities when they come out, whether that's attending meetings or being involved in consultations. We've built up a really good reputation of the apprenticeships that we've worked together to design and redesign over the last 10 years, and we're really proud of that. We want to maintain that high quality, high robust. We know how important these programs are to all of you, so I suppose it's a kind of joint endeavour to make sure that the future programs have the support and have the recognition of the employers that will be funding them, and for our future apprentices are still getting a really high quality apprenticeship service, offer, curriculum, assessment at the end of throughout their programs, but at the end of what can sometimes be a 5-year learner journey for some of these individuals. So big thanks from me. There is a final slide here on how you can stay in touch. Obviously, you've all been able to register today, which is fab. So I hope that you are signed up either through our LinkedIn or through our website, but please stay in touch. We will plan when we have more news. We will decide on how to communicate that, whether it be a repeat of a session like this, or whether it will be individual call out when we have a timeline and we know which standards we are going to start revising. But we will keep you in the loop when we know any more. If anyone has got any questions that they didn't want to raise today, but they have got, please reach out to any of us. And yeah, keep in touch, and thank you for joining. Take care.